in the chat. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. In the chat box, let us know what town and state you're participating from, and also one word that will describe you right now. Welcome, everyone. Chester, New Jersey. Hi, Emily, you're tired? Oh my gosh, that is real. I hope this conversation energizes you. Hi, Becky in Colorado. You are stressed. I'm sorry about that. Hi, Lily from New York City. Pregnant. I love it. Big shout out to you. And Gloria from Northern Virginia. You are fired up. I'm fired up too. Hi, Adriana. Hi, Jocelyn. Hi, Connie from Appleton, Wisconsin. Oh, you're feeling curious. That's exactly the energy we need tonight. Yes, we will be debunking a lot. We're going to get started in a little bit. We're just going to wait for a couple more folks to filter in. Hi, Anita. Hi, Priscilla. Big shout out. Priscilla is one of our beacons. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, Suzanne from Scottsdale. You're busy and you made time for us. We could not be more grateful. Thank you for coming. Hi, Brittany. Rymia from Jacksonville. I hope I got your name right. Thank you for coming. Hello. Okay. Awesome. We can go ahead and get started, right? So thank you so much for joining our first Keep Marching meeting of 2023. I am Joy, and I live in Florida, and I'm a part of Moms Rising's member engagement team, and I lead on our Keep Marching calls. Tonight, I am feeling fired up being here with you all. I've got with me Katie, who's the newest member of Moms Rising's engagement team. Please come off mute and introduce yourself.
Hi guys, it's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Katie. I am from Detroit, Michigan, and I'm really excited to join the team and meet you all.
Hello, welcome. We're glad to have you. She'll be keeping an eye on the chat for all your questions. Please meet Ruby, who's our web developer and senior technologist, and she's going to give you a quick walkthrough of Zoom instructions and protocols.
Hi, everybody. If you see me looking off to the side, it's because I'm letting more people in from the waiting room. I'm Ruby Sinreich. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in Durham, North Carolina. We generally plan for these meetings to be about 60 minutes, but if it's going well and the conversation is rich, we'll let it go over time. If you can't stay and you need to leave, don't worry. The whole meeting's being recorded and it'll be shared widely, so you can come back anytime and see what you missed. If you're not familiar with Zoom, here are some brief instructions. In the top right corner of your screen, you'll see options for speaker view or gallery view. Today, we encourage you to select gallery view, which is better for small group meetings. That way you can see everybody else. It's much more fun. In the top right corner of your own small box where you see yourself, you'll see functions that are under your own control. If you aren't being identified by your name, please use rename to change it to your name so that people know who you are. In the top right corner of your box, you'll also see mute. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking to reduce background noise for everyone. And let me warn you that if you're making background noise, I will mute you. Now, look at the bottom of the Zoom page. You'll see a function called chat. Click that and the chat window should appear on the right side of your screen. And you'll see everybody sending their awesome greetings there. We'll be sharing resources in the chat box, so please keep the chat open. Anytime during the program, if you have thoughts or questions you want to share, feel free to type them in the chat box. Remember not to do anything that you don't want seen on camera. If you have thoughts, questions, or comments for us, please send them to keepmarching@MomsRising.org. You can see Katie just posted that email address in the chat. And now back to you, Joy.
Thank you, Ruby. Thank you. So to those of you who have never participated in a Keep Marching online meeting, welcome. We are so glad that you joined us. Keep Marching is Moms Rising's community of highly engaged active members who are taking action online, making phone calls, sharing their personal stories, and really working in their own communities, whatever their capacity for change. Keep Marching is really the place where our members have the most access to Moms Rising staff and resources, It's where we support you in your activism and develop your leadership. We invite you to join our closed Facebook group where you can hang out and share information with powerful activists from across the country and with Moms Rising staff. We're posting the links in the chat box right now. Again, this entire program is being recorded and will publicly be shared with our Keep Marching community. Now let's get to our program. Are we excited? So I know you've all been hearing about or confused by the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, and you're eager to dive into it. Let's start by answering a few questions. Please come off camera and raise your hand, or you can digitally raise your hand using your reaction button. Okay, so before you received the invite to this Keep Marching call, how many people had heard about the Parents' Bill of Rights? Okay, quite a number of people. Okay, great. Okay, so how many people, when you first heard it, thought, sounds cool, must be a good thing, we definitely need this? Oh, good to know. It looks like most people were like, no, not really. That's good. You all are better than me.
Those of us who live in Florida have experience with this kind of thing.
Oh, and we'll talk about Florida in a little bit, right? And I would love for you to include your comments and questions in the chat. Thank you, Vicky. So I thought it was a good thing, right? I thought our country is finally centering the needs of parents. So you can imagine my shock when I dug a little deeper and realized that the Parents' Bill of Rights actually meant that Black history could be erased from our education system, and that it's actually a tool of the Moms for Liberty, which we'll learn about them in a little bit. But it's part of their agenda to erase socioeconomic and racial diversity, which you and I know is vital to building a country where everyone can thrive. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. On tonight's agenda, we're going to dive deep into the Parents' Bill of Rights. We're really going to look at it first from the national level and then on a local, on the ground level. I am grateful that we have two super people who are really going to help us make sense of what is going on and what could be happening in our communities, and most importantly, how we can fight back. First up, we are going to chat with Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, Moms Rising's executive director, who has been at the forefront of fighting this bill nationally. Welcome, Kristen.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Joy. Thank you for bringing us together, and with everyone who's on tonight to talk, to build change, and also to learn. Thank you.
Awesome. We are glad to have you here. So let's get started. Kristen, what is the Parents' Bill of Rights and why is it harmful to kids and families?
Well, I loved what you said at the beginning, Joy, about how it's a really misleading title, and it is misleading, it turns out, on purpose. So the Parents' Bill of Rights is more aptly named the Parents' Bill of Wrongs, and it's tapping into a deep frustration that is important, it's warranted, that parents across the country are feeling, primarily because we don't have the care infrastructure and other supports that we need. And so I want to say that right now, parents are rightfully frustrated, but the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights is really a Parents' Bill of Wrongs. What it is, it's a bill that actually codifies and sets the legislative framework for book bans, for pushing out accurate history, and for censorship, and for exclusion of important communities. And it is not okay. It's not fair. And so what does it mean if a bill like this was implemented? What it means if a bill like this was implemented, as it has been in places like Florida, which one of the people on just said, it means that diverse books like the biographies of Harriet Tubman and Celia Cruz have been removed from classrooms in mass book bans. It means textbooks are removed that are erasing Black history and erasing important historical moments, including why Rosa Parks held her seat on the bus, sparking the historic Montgomery bus boycott. It means, and this is important, teachers leaving the workforce in droves, exacerbating teacher shortages at a time when Black and Latinx teachers are already underrepresented in the teaching profession. It means LGBTQIA clubs and supports are removed from schools and students are excluded. And it also means that bans are being proposed even on sexual health education, including conversations about menstruation. So what it means is pushing parents away from being able to have the freedom to be able to have inclusive communities, accurate education, and students and teachers supported. So that's not okay. Now, why did it happen? And I'll try to be short here because people are like, what is going on? Where did this come from? When Donald Trump lost the White House, Steve Bannon, his strategist in chief, said the way to get back the White House for the MAGA extremist Republicans is through the school boards. And there are 76 million mom voters in the United States of America. Who on here is a mom? Who on here has ever had a mom at any point in their life? That's all of us. There's a tremendous amount of mom voters. Mom voters are incredibly powerful. And what happened is that far-right extremists have found out that there are 76 million mom voters, and they are trying to use what I call hate spaghetti. It's lots of hateful things that they're throwing against the wall to see what sticks. How many people when you're growing up had that whole thing where you learned, like, let's throw spaghetti at the wall to see if it's done, to see if it sticks? That's what's happening, only with hate messaging, hate legislation, and hate bills. So it's not one type of harm that's happening. It's sort of a series of harms with the goal of creating wedge issues in the mom vote electorate to take back the White House for the MAGA extremist Republicans in 2024. So this is not happening by accident. And that's what I think is important, because while the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, which I can't even call it that, I want to call it the Parents' Bill of Wrongs, it's so insulting, passed the US House, it will not pass the US Senate, and it will not be signed into law by the president, who has already said that he opposes it, rightly so. But this issue and this hate spaghetti is not going to go away. In fact, it's probably going to intensify as we get closer to the election and these wedge issues are brought up into that mom vote electorate time and time again, we expect. So that's where we come in. We are the Truth Squad. We are people who are here to say that those moms do not represent us. We are the moms for freedom, right? We are the moms for justice. And what's interesting is that this is really a well-funded vocal minority of people. When you look at polling, there are more people who agree with us about what we want, liberty, truth, and justice for all, than people who are for this hate spaghetti. So if you're feeling alone, you're not alone. It's just that negative messaging is twice as loud as positive messaging. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get together and share what was really going on.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kristen. You're right. It is part of hate messaging, right? And Susanna, you're right. The bill does target queer youth in a truly dangerous way. You're also right, Susan, when you say that the other side is really good with words, like, and we should think about pro-life, right? So, Kristen, you've already started to do this, but I would love for you to talk about it a little bit more explicitly. So everywhere we turn, it seems that there is an attack on kids and families, from the Parents' Bill of Rights to the culture wars, to critical race theory, to gender-neutral bathrooms. So what really is the relationship between these issues?
It's really, I would say, trying to tap into that real frustration and switch the conversation. So it's a massive vote grab. Of course, we talked about that, an intentional massive vote grab. But it's also trying to switch the conversation away from what the majority of parents and people in America really want and need. And we know from polling, for example, that the majority of parents in the United States of America and people, even MAGA Republicans, 76%, want paid family medical leave. And we know that we're one of only 6 countries in the world without that crucial policy in place for when a new child arrives or a serious health crisis strikes. So the top policies that we're hearing about that the Republican leadership in the US House and Senate right now have not brought forward in any significant way are addressing the fact that childcare costs more than college. We need access to affordable childcare in pre-K right now. Addressing the fact that we don't have maternal health equity, and actually maternal morbidity or maternal deaths are going up, and Black women are 3 to 4 times as likely to die in childbirth as white women. That's not okay. That's an emergency that needs to be addressed right now. Addressing the fact that we need to have access to schools that have mental health supports, teachers that are supported, and students that are supported. All of those issues are getting swept under the rug as we have this hate spaghetti being thrown at the wall over here to divide our communities. And then over here, we have the real issues that moms, parents, and people in polling actually agree on. So it's important to keep our eye on the prize of change, to keep going with the Moms for Freedom agenda, which we can put in the chat, and to address the disinformation that's being spread. I do want to put a point on one thing, and that is that it is the House Republican leadership who are pushing and passing this so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, which is a Parents' Bill of Wrongs, really. And this is one of those issue areas where, unfortunately, it has become a partisan issue. Unfortunately, at a time when gun violence is on the rise, and when families are really in crisis, this type of hate spaghetti is being used as a distraction to get done what really needs to get done, which is address the issues that I just talked about in terms of the care infrastructure and address the inadequate gun violence laws that we have in America.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a quick reminder to everyone watching and listening, if you have any thoughts or questions, please keep putting them in the chat. We'll have lots of time later for Kristen to respond. So Kristen, you mentioned a little bit earlier, you started talking about Congress and the Parents' Bill of Rights and what is happening in Congress, right? And how it's the House Republican leadership that is really pushing this forward. So what has happened in Congress with the Parents' Bill of Rights? Have they voted? Have they not voted? What is going on?
So sadly, the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, which I can't even still, as you know, say without saying Parents' Bill of Wrong, actually passed the U.S. House under Republican leadership. It then moved to the U.S. Senate, where it is not expected to pass. The U.S. Senate still has Democratic-controlled leadership. They do not support this bill because when you look under the hood of the bill, it does have the legal framework to legislate hate and harm, censorship, book bans, and more. And then we also have the President of the United States of America who has spoken out against this. One of the big things, though, is that when you look at who is funding these efforts, it's big corporations that have funded Donald Trump and his similar politicians that are in that MAGA Republican extremist area. So again, even though this isn't expected to pass, we still need to remain vigilant, engaged, because we expect more of this type of legislation that looks like one thing and is actually something else to keep coming up as we get closer to the 2024 elections.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So we're glad that this issue failed in Congress and it isn't going any further. So what steps really should Congress be taking to address the issues that impact moms and families?
This is the best question ever, because I think when we look at polling and we look at the membership of Moms Rising, there's so much universal support across Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians. We absolutely need the freedom to be able to afford childcare and to make fair pay. We need Congress to address that. We need the freedom to be able to have access to equitable health care, and Congress needs to address that. We need the ability to have paid family medical leave and an end to the gun violence in the United States of America. We need universal background checks, a ban reinstated for high-capacity magazines and military-style assault weapons. And we need age limits on gun purchases. We know the solutions for America. They aren't rocket science. Most other countries who are industrialized nations have already passed all of these policies, and we can too. And in fact, not having these policies is not just hurting families, it's also hurting our economy as a whole. When we have parents pushed out of the labor force, we have jobs that are empty, we have supply chain issues, and we have an economy that suffers. Jerome Powell recently said, he's our Federal Reserve chair, that because the United States of America is so far behind in the care infrastructure, it's actually hurting our international competitiveness. So we do have a real emergency in America. And I'll put in the chat, I can't talk and type at the same time, but the top 10 policies at Moms Rising, which includes the policies that I was just talking about right now. We do have this emergency in America, but the good news is we know how to address it. We know what policies are needed. Many of these policies actually were in Biden's Build Back Better package when he stepped into presidency. We also know our power together, and I want to always take a moment to talk about our power together. How many people feel cynical? I know a lot of people feel cynical. You see this hate spaghetti. It's awful. It makes my stomach hurt. It's terrible. I'm like, what is happening in our country? All valid concerns. I'm here to tell you the good news before we go to the next question. And that's it, because of the voices of moms, dads, parents, and people like you. At the end of 2022, we helped pass a policy that people have been pushing for a long time, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. That just passed the House, the Senate, and was signed by the president. Similarly, the Pump for Working Mothers Act was just passed. Also, we helped get past, all of you, by we, I'm including everybody on Zoom, we helped get past the a year of full coverage for people who have just had babies for healthcare. We also just helped get past a 30% increase in the child development block grants for childcare to the states, about $8 billion. And the list goes on of what we together just helped pass at the end of 2022. In addition, our votes, our volunteering, 64,000 Moms Rising members stepped up and helped get out the vote in this last midterm election. And we helped hold the Senate and get politicians in office who care about care and justice and equity. So we really are powerful together. And the messaging that we're seeing in things like the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, which is really the Parents' Bill of Wrongs, is meant to undermine not only our schools and teachers and families and communities, but also our confidence in our own power. So I'm here to tell you that together we are so powerful. We just have to stay paying attention and stay involved and, wade through this together when we're looking at these sort of bills that are named one thing but do the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And you are leading right into the next question. So Kristen, what actions will Moms Rising be taking on the Parents' Bill of Rights in the coming months? And how can our members get involved on a national level?
This is always my favorite question. First of all, you are so powerful. Even just when you sign a petition, make a phone call, respond to a text, just take 2 seconds to take action. In the coming weeks, we do expect more of this ridiculous, bad, awful type of legislation to come up. If you're on the Moms Rising email list, which many of you are, or on our SMS list, we will reach out to you and say, 911, we need your help. We need some backup. So staying involved in responding in those moments is really important. We also have a petition, which I think is going in the chat right now, to tell Congress, stop attacking parents. Tell the Republicans, the Democrats, everybody in Congress, all leaders, stop attacking parents. Get working on what really matters to us, and stop pushing hate instead of real change. And that petition you can sign, but not only sign it, share it with 5 friends. It really does help. Moms Rising grew to be a membership of over 1 million people through mom telling mom, dad telling dad, parent telling parent, caregiver telling caregiver about how to get involved by doing things like sharing petitions like that. We also absolutely need your help in stopping the gun glorification in the United States of America and banning assault weapons. We need to speak out loudly, both for change and against the glorification of guns. It did not go unnoticed by any of us that the Christmas card sent out by the Tennessee member of Congress where the mass shooting just occurred had not only the member of Congress holding a semi-automatic on the front, but also every member of his family, including his children, were also holding military-style assault weapons. That kind of glorification needs to be called out and frankly shamed. We cannot have more guns than people in the United States of America, with the leading cause of childhood and adolescent death be guns. That's shameful. So we need to keep raising our voice on that as well. I have a lot of actions. I could go on for 5 years. You all will be bored, I know, but the easiest way to do it is to get involved, stay involved, and pay attention when we're sending you emails and SMS, because we are in constant contact with members of Congress about where the fulcrum points of change, what's moving, where our voice is needed, and we will let you know immediately. So thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you. We are now going to move to the audience Q&A. I know you all have already started putting questions in there. Let's see. Okay, Mickey. Mickey asks, is it true that only one parent has to protest a book for it to be removed?
I would say that that depends on where you are. So we're looking at school board level problems. I see Nina on right now. Nina could probably speak to this better than I can. We have Nina Perez, who is on with Moms Rising, and she is on the ground in Florida dealing with many of these very local fights. But it is going school board to school board. Nina, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. So the national bill is very similar to the Florida bill in the way that part of what it's doing is that it's codifying parental right over a child's right in the education setting, right? And so the way that it does that is to say that a parent's right is fundamental, which sounds good on face value, right? But it means at the expense essentially of other children, right? That your right to control your child's education matters more than what's happening in the education system, what the standards are, and it's not written in that way, of course, but that's essentially what it's saying. And so the way that it worked in Florida is that bill was passed first. And I just want to give a shout out to Elizabeth Anderson, who has been my teacher in this in many, many ways, who's on the call, and former school board member in my own county. And the way that it works is that passed first, and then other bills were passed that allowed the version, allowed other bans and other, like, for example, first it was this codification of this fundamental right of parents, and then came the expansion of Don't Say Gay, where then you could challenge something like an LGBTQ plus book based on gender conversations or sexuality. And then also was the Stop Woke Act, which then has allowed for the banning, just recently. The movie of Ruby Bridges was banned in a county. I'm happy to say, and we'll talk more about the wins later. It is now back in that school, but it is possible. So in that Ruby Bridges example, it was one parent who put in the request, and then they had to go through the process. I'll talk more about that in terms of what the burdensome of the process is and how that can be successful through basically creating an administrative burden. But yes, in the case of the codification of that, it can be just one parent complaint. And Liz, feel free,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nina and Kristen, for answering that. Linda is asking, who is funding these efforts? You talked a little bit earlier about the conservative efforts. So Kristen, who's funding this? And I want to give a big shout out to Taz, who has done a great job of answering this question and starting to answer it. But I would love for you, Kristen, to tell everyone in the room in case they're not watching the chat.
I didn't see the chat either. Taz, do you want to go first?
They might not be there right now.
Okay. So basically what's happening is it's looking like the same types of entities that funded Donald Trump's race to the White House are funding these efforts in terms of the locus of funding being far, far right foundations and entities that are really have been doing a lot of harm to our democracy as well. And so in the areas where we're seeing a lot of this pushback with the so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, at the same time, we're seeing similar bills that are about voter suppression, so not wanting to count every vote. We're seeing bills that are regressive coming forward at the state level by the hundreds. And so again, this is really going back to being a campaign tactic, which is ridiculous. Can we just have a moment? It is so ridiculous that the far right is using our families, our children, parents, and teachers as political footballs to try to gain access back into the White House. It's awful. And so that's where the funding is coming from. We also see funding like this going into the Moms for Liberty, which have nothing to do with Moms Rising, but is part of the reason why we redefined our top 10 that I put in the chat as the Moms for Freedom, because we do want the freedom to be able to make decisions and support our children and have loving communities and to be able to be there. And that entity is also having a lot of funding from corporations and mega funders. So there's a lot of overlap. And what is happening in the chat, Joy? Do you want to share anything from that?
Um,
With the funders, you were saying that there was somebody sharing about some of the funding.
yeah, Taz was saying exactly where the rest of the conservative money comes from. A strategist I know said some of it's even been tracked back to Russia. Lots of people benefit from a divided USA.
Yes, that's true. And Nina, did you want to add anything? This is an important question.
We know that there's a lot of private funders. We've been talking locally about the need for there to be a larger investigation on who's funding folks like Moms for Liberty. But what we do know is that folks like the Koch brothers, some of the typical Republican funders, like it's already been said, but also there's just been private money going into some of these organizations. Like the Publix heiress did a huge donation to Moms for Liberty here. So there's just a lot of private dollars going into these organizations. I'm sorry, I have a cold. I'm going to try my best here.
And Sarah also says the ALEC, Waltons, DeVos, brothers. Thank you. We've got time for about 2 more questions. And I love Katie's question. She says, how do we support transparency and parental involvement without supporting this bill of BS?
That's a great question. I think we do exactly that. Support transparency and parental involvement, and don't go in through bills that are, called the Parents' Bill of Rights, but are the Parents' Bill of Wrongs. So it doesn't mean that we don't want to be involved in our children's schools and our communities because we don't like these ridiculous, regressive, harmful bills. We can still be part of the PTA. We can still do all of the things for our children. We love our children. And again, there are very valid frustrations about what's happening with moms and parents in America. That's a big reason why we're Moms Rising. We hear you. But this direction is not the one that lifts our children, our students, and our teachers. There was another great question, Joy, if I can add one other answer in that I just saw. And can I do it, Joy? Can I do another answer? Okay.
Yes.
So there was a question, if this bill isn't going to pass, why are we signing and sharing a petition? This is my absolute favorite question. The reason why is this is not the beginning, middle, or end of this story. Again, why this Parents' Bill of Wrongs has been proposed is to do those wedges into the mom electorate in order to grab the White House in 2024. And so we want to send a strong message to the House, to the Senate, and to the Oval Office that the Moms of Liberty, while they are a well-funded minority of people in America, do not represent us. We want to stop them from continually dropping legislation that looks like this. Tell them that we know what they're doing when they do that. We're not fooled by the fact that the first 11 pages might look okay, and then on the page 12, it's like, boom, disaster in terms of creating a legislative framework for hate. And so we really have to make our voices heard in order to stop this trend from continuing, or at least slow it down in Congress. I will tell you, when this was voted on in the US House, not every Republican voted for it, which means they are hearing us. It didn't go by a party line vote, which many people thought it was. And so keeping up the pressure that we saw what happened and we don't want to see it again is so important right now, because there are very real problems that they should be working on instead, like coming up soon in both the House and the Senate and the Oval Office is SNAP, which is food stamps, and Medicaid, all of which need funding in an immediate way, and all of which need immediate work. So they need to get working on real issues. Nina, I saw you lean in. Did you want to add something?
I would say that there's also a lot in the chat about, how do we fight this? And especially if the vocal minority is so well funded. I mean, they're well funded, but they're still a minority, right? To Kristen's point earlier, we know that people by and large are behind, are not behind this, are behind having equity and programs that actually support families. And so our numbers speak in our favor. We just have to be able to get organized and activated in our communities. And the other piece I'll say is that another reason to fight this nationally is because for those of us in Florida, we know this already, is that the name of the bill also means that when you vote against it, Republicans and the opposition can do attack ads on members of Congress who did not vote for it without any explanation of what's actually in the bill, right? So you could have an attack ad on Senator Murray in Washington State saying like, Senator Murray says she's for families, but she voted against parental rights with no explanation, right? Because of the name of the bill. And so it's important that we do the education and fight it now, because this is not just about starting this messaging war, is that they're building for future attacks on folks actually fighting for the rights of families in Congress, right? Like Patty Murray has been a historic champion of childcare in our country and for families. Not that they're going to target her specifically, she's just the example I have in my mind, but that's another reason to fight that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kristen and Nina. It really is about standing up and letting Congress, letting people know that, hey, we do not accept this hate. This is not okay for this country that we're trying to build for everyone. It's simply not. I also want to add that Priscilla has put a really good point in the chat. Priscilla, do you want to come off mute and say your school board suggestion?
Yes, yes. Here locally, we have websites for the school board, and we can go to the websites and look at the meetings or go to the school board meetings, speak up at the school board meetings. You know, those are open meetings that you can go to. Go and sit in, go in and ask to speak, you know, have your voice heard. I mean, that's the most important thing. If they don't hear our voices, they don't hear our demands or our opinions, then it doesn't count. You know, we're just being silent. We're standing by as a silent majority. And to follow the issues and stuff, go to the website, go to the State Board of Education website. They have to have, all of this stuff has to be public.
Thank you. That is a great suggestion. And on that note, we will end this part, say a big thank you to Kristen. Thank you for sharing with us about how we can fight the Parent Bill of Rights on a national level.
And I want to take a fast moment to thank Joy, Nina, Katie, Ruby, and Gloria on the Moms Rising team for being here tonight, for helping us get organized, helping us make change, and thank every single one of you for being here as well. We could not do this alone, and we are so much stronger together. So thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you. Next, we are going to chat with Moms Rising's National Director of Early Learning, Nina Perez. And we've already got a little bit of info, you know, she's already jumped in a little bit. So welcome, Nina. We're so glad to have you here. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you so much. I'm sick, but I think I'm better than I was the time that we did this Tuesday night. So we're gonna see how this goes. For folks who don't already know me, I am the National Director of Early Childhood, but I'm also right now one of our organizers in Florida doing some of this work locally. I'm a mom. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. For those of you who are talking about you're in Jacksonville, email me. I'll put my email in the chat. And if you're in Florida in general. And I have a kiddo who some of you saw come in earlier today. And I'm here and I'm excited to have this conversation with you all. This is such important work.
Thank you for being here, Nina. I'm so glad you're able to join us even though you're sick. So first question, Nina, how have you seen the Parents' Bill of Rights play out on the ground in Florida? What are some of the harmful impacts you're seeing or hearing about?
Absolutely. So, you know, I want to recognize what some people have been saying in the chat. We're not the only state being impacted by these parental rights bills, but we are one of the pioneering states, and one of the first. And we, for a long time, we were the only, but now we're one of the first to pass the parental rights bill locally. And this is significant because by population, Florida is the third largest state in the country. And part of what is happening too is that we are determining a lot of what's happening with these conversations nationally and other states, in part because our Governor DeSantis is getting ready for a presidential run. And so we are really, what's happening in Florida is shaping many of the bills that happen across the country, which is why some of the conversation is going to be focused there. And what we've seen in terms of the impacts of these bills are not theoretical, they are real. I mean, we've seen censorship and attacks. Many people have already been talking about it in the chat, on the rights of children to learn and to be safe at school. And this is really important because part of what's been happening is that we've kind of been shifting away from talking about the rights and rights of children and students. And that's part of what's really under attack here. This has meant mass book bans, including diverse books, like Kristen already mentioned, about Black history and biographies, and LGBTQ books about families, board books like It Takes Two to Tango. And just this week, a graphic novel about Anne Frank was banned in one of our counties. You know, there's been lesson changes. A teacher in Tallahassee was fired recently for teaching a lesson of the David because a parent said that the classical David by Michelangelo was pornography. There have been textbook revisions that, like Kristen spoke up earlier, and they're literally erasing our histories. And there's attack on GSA clubs. And here in Duval County, folks were told to remove their safe space stickers and critical supports have been removed in our county for LGBTQ students. Teachers are being fired and teachers are quitting, which is really making our teacher shortage in our state worse, where we have a crisis going on in the state where we have permanent substitute teachers teaching because we don't have enough teachers, and this is exacerbating that problem. And more recently, like Kristen already noted, we're seeing some attacks on comprehensive health education.
Yeah, and this is all awful. This is not the kind of country we want. These are not the things we want to see, right? We need more teachers that are well paid. So, Nina, how is this all related to Moms for Liberty, parental rights extremism, and the movement's history?
You know, I think especially for us in Florida, Moms for Liberty can feel like they just popped out of nowhere, right? Like they're like, where do these people come from? Like, but actually, this is not a new movement. I mean, the parental rights extremist movement goes all the way back to resisting integration following Brown versus Board of Education. And they've continued attacks on education, including the complete homeschool that allowed for the creation of far-right curriculum for homeschool that's done much of the erasure and many of the things that we are actually now seeing happening in our public schools, they had already done in the homeschool environment. So this is an old playbook in a new setting that they are doing again. And in its most recent iteration, Moms for Liberty grew out of this movement and saw this kind of successful moment in the pandemic fights around masks. Folks will remember there was many news articles around parents fighting to not have mask mandates in school, and Elizabeth Anderson, who's on the call, who I'll give her some space here in a bit with her kiddo, remembers those well, I'm sure. And they saw an opportunity where parents were actually in distress, like families were left behind during the pandemic, and that's just a reality. There's not a person with a school-age child or a younger child that did not feel left behind in the pandemic. And they built off that fear and that anger and that frustration and started building their movement. And then we saw these parental rights pieces of legislation come forward, starting in 2021 in Florida, where then they've codified what I was talking about earlier, the parent over the child, and now we've had these cascade of bills that have been exacerbating the problem, and more happening in this legislature, where they're expanding the possibilities of what they can ban and what they can challenge. And now even just attacking the rights of parents in healthcare and all kinds of things.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for specifically stating that the Moms for Liberty, it's not a new thing, right? They're not a new group. You might have just seen them pop up in the last year or two, but it's the same playbook for a really long time, since Brown v. Board of Education. So I'm going to ask a question to the audience. Just go ahead and raise your hands or use the reaction to raise your hands. So how many of you all have seen the Moms for Liberty groups pop up in your communities? Oh, okay. Quite a number of people. That's good to know. Thank you. Thank you. So after hearing more about this, how many of you will now be closely following and maybe even showing up at school board meetings where they usually are at?
Can I speak?
Oh, who said that?
Hi, Laura Penn.
Hi, Laura. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm in Western New York. and I am a school librarian, and we've had the Moms for Liberty here for a little while. They've been kind of wreaking havoc, and so a group of librarians and like-minded people have started showing up at their meetings as well, at the Moms for Liberty meetings, which they're not terribly happy about. But we show up there, and we get notes on their talking points, and it's interesting. There's a number of parents from my own district that are actually members of Moms for Liberty, and they go to the meetings as well. And so it's interesting, but I've made it my goal to bring somebody new with me every meeting, and we show up, and we take notes, and I'm on a first name basis now with the county chairperson, but we go, and at this point we're now at the last meeting we were equal numbers, opposition and Moms for Liberty. I don't know if that'll remain the case, but we it's just incredibly important, I think, any time there's a chapter, for people to show up and show that there's opposition, and be aware of their talking points. And I think that it may not be as easy in places where where they will outnumber you, but I think just being aware of what they're going to put out to your legislatures, what they're going to put out to your local school districts. We were aware of people that were, running for school boards, when they showed up at the meetings, passing out their cards to people. We were able to talk to them. I don't know how that'll actually play out, but, I think just, we'll see how that goes. But, that's, this we wouldn't have known this, but in May they have a special event, which is going to be Libraries 101, and we're going to show up, and I guess their big one of their big talking points is porn in libraries, and so we are we have T-shirts with the definition of porn, the Supreme Court definition of porn on them, that we're going to wear to the meetings, and because they seem to be fixated on porn in libraries. So that's going to be interesting, but it's it's
Thank you for sharing. No, this is
yeah.
great. I'm glad that you did share that, you are doing a great job of going to the meetings, and not just going by yourself, but like making a commitment to take someone with you. You've got to tell us, contact us, reach out to us, and keep marching. Let us know some of the tactics that you are using so that we can share with everyone. Thank you so much for coming off mute to share.
Well, definitely, absolutely.
Nina.
And Sabine, I see that you have your hand up, but if folks don't mind, I'm actually I see so many of you asking for strategies and tactics in the chat. Like, it's so clearly impacting people on a really visceral level. So Joy, don't hate me. So I'm gonna cede some of my time to Elizabeth Anderson, who's on this call, who I've been working with really closely in Duval County. For folks who don't know her, she is a former school board member out of Duval County, who unfortunately was pushed out by a Moms for Liberty member, who has been a fierce advocate for children in our county, and has seen firsthand some of these Mom for Liberty strategies, but also has been on the other side of it. Liz, are you able to get on, since I, just.
Hey, Nina. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for giving me a minute. We have no school tomorrow, so my little one is just finishing up a movie, but I was on the school board here in Duval County. I was the chair of the school board during COVID, and the rising of Moms for Liberty here, and the anti-mask movement that really bore that out. And I think it is important to know that the Moms for Liberty folks who started that organization were school board members. Some of them still are school board members here in the state of Florida. And several years before that, they tried to get together and start this sort of conservative coalition of school board members. and really laid the foundation and the groundwork for some of this, these talking points and these ideas. So when this moment of COVID came up and they really found this space to capitalize, that's when it just sort of grew, and they had people and big players in place. My opponent who took my seat this past election cycle announced on Steve Bannon's radio show, was a Ron DeSantis endorsed candidate, Moms for Liberty member, with no experience. And so these people are doing exactly what they came to do, which is to take seats and spread misinformation so that they can affect policy. I definitely think it's important to stay engaged locally. I think one of the things that we're finding here is when you go to your school board meetings, it's important to talk about children. It's important to talk about the experiences of our children. We are seeing the same attacks on sex ed that I see people talking about in the chat. LGBTQ students, the Don't Say Gay bill is the Parental Bill of Rights. And those are the areas where they're saying, well, parents need to be made aware of what's happening with their children. Parents need to know what their children are being exposed to. Parents need to have the final say, as if their children are not whole, independent humans with liberties and freedoms of their own. We are in this space where parents seem to think their children are just an extension of them. I happen to be a mental health counselor in my other life, one of the many hats that I wear. And I think being able to really say, we all have rights as parents, and our children have rights too. And every time a wedge issue comes up in your school board, find your like-minded groups, go ahead and get those coordinated and organized now, don't wait. And then go and talk about how this really impacts real children. And this isn't the parents' rights, this is the parents' wrongs. I love that framing. This isn't the right way of looking at it. We really want to be able to make sure that our children have access to complete histories, that they are able to protect themselves and keep themselves healthy and well and receive age-appropriate sex education, that they can expand their minds and see themselves in the literature that is available to them, because that's what's going to promote literacy rates. This is about kids. It's not about politics. And if you can keep framing it there, and go to your school board meetings, that can be really powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Elizabeth. That is amazing. And you've already started talking about local organizing, right? Can you and Nina talk a little bit more about the action you did around banned books in Florida?
Yeah, I kind of want to make Liz talk about it, even though I'm supposed to.
Yeah, Nina, I know you're trying to breathe. I was so excited when Nina came to me and said, hey, we need to do something around this. We want to capitalize on this moment. And I'm so grateful to Moms Rising for being able to invest some funding. So here in Duval County, we knew that this legislation was moving last year. And so the superintendent and the school board had approved $300,000 in books from the Essential Voices collection. Now, this is a collection of books that has a broad range of diverse characters and storylines to really make sure that children can see themselves, and if not themselves, the experience of someone who does not look like them, so that they can learn through literature and learn through books. And the district pulled back or held lots of books rather than moving those books into schools when they were received, because we knew that this legislation was moving and they weren't really sure whether they were going to get in trouble or what was going to be said. And so that's problematic. And I think Nina shared with me the term shadow ban, and I think that's the best way to describe it. And when we look at making sure that books are in the hands of children, what we decided to do was purchase, Nina, through Moms Rising, purchase books from this Essential Voices collection. We put together a little sticker and QR code that helped folks understand the dangers and risks of censorship and where this was coming from here in Florida. So not only the Parental Rights Bill, which was House Bill 1557, but also 1467, which called for the review of media materials, and also HB 7, the Stop Woke Act, that said you can't teach anything that might make someone uncomfortable because of their race. So this is where we're seeing books about diversity, books about LGBTQ people. This is how they're getting shadow banned, right? They're pulled, they're not being made available to students. They're saying they have to be reviewed until some media specialist somewhere with no funding can review the books and get them back in the classrooms. And sometimes they're not. And in which case, they want to say, oh, banning is a hoax. It's not a hoax. They're not being removed back to the classes. I don't know what else you call that. So we pulled together some people. I think it was a great event. We worked with a local literary group here. And we put these stickers and these QR codes in each of the books and got them out into the community. Lots of people put them in their little libraries. So we have like little free libraries. We have an organization here who's building little free libraries. They're calling them little diverse libraries that are specifically for books about other characters. And we're spreading them throughout the community, and people were really motivated and activated in that way because people understand that censorship is so dangerous. It's un-American, it's anti-democratic, and they want something to do. And this was one small way where we could say, help us come and put stickers in these books and put these books in your community.
And the cool thing about this event is we had almost 50 folks come in and out throughout the day. I see Laura, who was one of the folks who helped sticker books at that event. And the cool thing about this is that it created a community conversation. We had our children with us, but also the QR code leads to different actions that people can take in Florida to stop book bans. So not only did we have this fantastic event, but we also had media there, and it's continuing to put pressure, and we're seeing the pressure help us win. And so I think that especially because so many people are feeling despair right now, I know it doesn't feel like we're winning, but we are. Like, the book bans have become so incredibly unpopular that even the Moms for Liberty person who was supporting this on the school board, who is now in Elizabeth's former seat, is disassociating herself from it. She voted against something that she would normally vote for during our last school board meeting because she's so scared of being associated with the book bans. This is someone who was pushing them on the offset. We're also seeing our governor call it a hoax. He signed the bill into law. He could have vetoed it. It's his impact and his signing that made this happen. But even he's trying to disassociate from it because it's so incredibly unpopular. We're also seeing school districts respond to public pressure. And so for those of you asking for these strategies, creating local public pressure for folks in Florida, if you're not already following the Florida Freedom to Read project, I highly recommend them. We've been working closely with them to track. They're doing amazing, amazing work tracking locally what books are being shadow banned, right? What books are being pulled, what books are being banned outright, right? Because both things are happening. And where the challenges are in the process. Because what Liz was talking about in terms of the shadow bans, what they do is that they trap it. And the parents who are challenging these books know this. They know that the public schools don't have enough resources to take the books through the review process, because we still have a constitutional right? But because there's no funding, and some schools don't even have media specialists because they didn't have the funding for the media specialists, there's no way to take the books through the review process, which effectively bans them. But the public pressure has been so much that they are starting to respond, trying to hire media specialists. I just saw an ad in Duval County trying to hire media specialists, which means that they are feeling the pressure. So we are winning this fight. And I see that someone has a question, Vicky, I'm sorry.
Actually, it's more of a comment. We're talking about strategies, and the concern I would have about stocking lots of the little free libraries is it would be really easy for a mom for liberty to go and take those books out. And I believe it was the superintendent from Duval came down to St. John's and was giving a speech and had what we thought was kind of an interesting idea. That was perhaps communities of faith, churches and synagogues and mosques and UU fellowships and things could create libraries and, invite kids in the community to come and get and read books there. And I thought that was an interesting idea because the state cannot regulate their libraries by law. So, I'm not sure what's been done on that, but I just throw that out as another idea.
I love that. Let's do that. I'm here for that. I mean, I think too, some of the things that we didn't just do free little libraries. We were very careful, by the way, not to announce. So one of the folks like Laura and folks who joined the book bash, the banned book bash that we did, and we're hoping to do more of these in the state, is that everybody took some books with them. There was someone who just made me laugh. I'm taking a big stack with me because I'm a delivery driver. And whenever I see a free library outside of I'm just going to go and drop it off. So the idea is that we didn't even know where the books were going to go. which was part of the intent. So as to subvert that idea that someone could just know where they all were and pull them, we specifically distributed them ourselves across the community. Some people put them on Buy Nothing groups. Someone took them to community centers that they had partnerships with. And so, yes, like that was a fear. And so what we did is that we said we were doing the project, but intentionally did not track where the books went, because we can track who uses the QR code instead and who's going and getting the information. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Else, we have found that some of our high school students have come and spoken out very eloquently at the school board meetings. And, you know, they kind of expect our group to show up and speak. But I have also heard that in some areas, one of the things our superintendent is fond of saying, after we had fought so hard to keep some books last year with the new law, now they've thrown some of those out, is that we're not banning books. We can't regulate what kids, you know, do on their own or whatever. I have heard of, in some areas, some of the high school students forming banned book clubs where they read books and talk about them on their lunch hours. I think that's a great idea too.
Yeah, you know, I think I always hope that the offshoot of this is going to be that when you ban something, it makes it more popular to the kids. And so like maybe diverse books are just going to become more popular, but we have to make sure that they get into the hands of those who need it the most. Not every child has an adult, a grown up in their life who's going to take them to the library, take them to, you know, to or be able to even afford to take them to the bookstore, right, to get the books themselves. And diverse books, you know, these books can be very expensive. You know, and so it's really important that at the same time that we're getting the books back into the community, so sorry, that we're fighting to get them in schools, because for some kids, the only books that they have access to are those in schools. I know that most of the copies of books I got when I was a young person were from my own high school, you know, my own library at school. And so both things we can do at the same time. I know that there's another question for me, and I can talk forever, but I also want to give a chance for, are there, okay.
Oh, Nina, what did you say? You cut out a little bit at the end.
Oh, I was giving you the space to rail me back in, and you know, I wanted to see if do we want to give room for folks to ask more questions on strategies?
No, absolutely. Yes. If folks have more questions, please keep asking them.
You know, and we all just agree that we can stay a little bit longer. It's clear that this conversation is, you know, folks have lots of questions. I'll also say that we recently had, we're not doing this work by ourselves, by the way. And so Moms Rising is partnering with a lot of folks across the state, in Florida, and with local organizations. And that makes all the difference, right? Like, find your people. And, you know, for those of you in Florida, like we can help be your people, you know, and in your other states, we can try to help you find your people. And, you know, I think I think that makes all the difference. So here locally, we've been working a lot with this group called Public School Defenders, that we've been working with specifically in coordination around school board. And I already mentioned Florida Freedom to Read Project. And recently we all had a win. You know, sex ed was coming under challenge, and we're going to have to fight it every year. We all found out, to like our dismay, like this was a yearly thing. I think Liz, you were the one who told us, and we were like, no, but you know, we will continue to fight it yearly. And we had a big win there. You know, Moms for Liberty came out in force. They really thought they were going to win and change the sex ed curriculum and essentially pull it because of one reference to LGBTQ plus students. And we came out in force. We did a petition. We had emails go in, and we had close to 200 emails go into our school board members using the Moms Rising platform. And Jen, who is one of the leaders of Public School Defenders, came out with this awesome idea for folks looking for strategies of printing out like just label notes with the vote rec and the talking points to put on comment cards. So for folks who can't attend the meeting because they have the young children at home and don't have childcare, they can swing by, submit a comment card, and that doesn't necessarily work in every school board. But if you have that capacity, that worked out amazingly, because then we had more comments on the record for folks who couldn't stay. And we made it easy and accessible. We also had a rally in front before the school board meeting, and we won in a climate where the far right and the parental right extremism was winning in our county. We had a win. And so it's possible. And I think it's becoming more possible by the day as more people understand what this is, understand what's happening, and move these things forward.
Nina, can I jump in really quick?
Yes, please.
One of the things for people that maybe are new to this whole parental rights movement that we are seeing some evolution in, one of the things that we're seeing the Moms for Liberty folks ask for is, and they're anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I haven't heard that part of the conversation come up yet. So school boards around the state of Florida are being asked to change their equity policies, for example. This is where woke goes to die, or they've changed DEI around to DIE. And in this guise that being equitable or trying to be diverse is inherently racist. I know that sounds so crazy. It feels really crazy coming out of my mouth, but we are in a book ban space right now. We're anti-LGBTQ, but this sort of gaslighting of what race is and what diversity and inclusion and equity means is sort of the next layer. And I just want to make sure that folks are prepared for that. If you haven't heard that or seen that, they're really attacking our higher ed institutions here in Florida right now. And that's something to be on the lookout for. Sorry to interject.
Oh, don't apologize. We are grateful for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody have a question? Would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Vicky, do you have a question?
I have another thing to throw out kind of as an alert. That's something that we have seen. DeSantis supported a Mom for Liberty who got onto our school board, and we have tried to engage her. And one of the things that I think we need to watch out for and try to oppose is they want to switch an opt-out policy to an opt-in policy. And I think that's very, very dangerous and pernicious, particularly with respect to, say, the LGBTQIA kids that may need to see representation. One of the biggest populations of homeless youth is kids, LGBTQ kids that have been kicked out of their homes. So I think it's very dangerous to have an opt-in policy requiring parental consent. So I would encourage everybody, if you see that, oppose it.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. That is part of the fight. If you see it, oppose it.
Yeah, Vicky, I just want to uplift that. That's something that we've seen here as well. It's a strategy because if you're a parent with young children, you'll know a lot of paperwork comes home from school. And so it creates an administrative burden where children who are closest to impact, essentially, closest to the need for services or the need for some of these educational components are actually going to be left out because they're the least likely to do an opt-in measure, either because, I think we forget that there are high school students that are homeless, that are couch surfing, that don't have other supports, which is what we should actually be able to focus on, is supporting our children so that they can actually learn and thrive. And because of that opt-in, opt-out structure, it creates a mechanism for children not to be able to get access to things. We have a line of folks with their hands raised. Joe, you want me to go in order of the people I have on the screen, or do you want to do it?
Who do you have first? I have Susan.
I have Susan, yeah.
Awesome. Susan, please come off mute and ask your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, is there any way to fight this? One parent can get a book pulled, until it's reviewed indefinitely, or a video or whatever, like in the Ruby Ridges case. Is there a strategy to fight this, or is this set in stone that any one parent can pull any book for any length of time until it's reviewed?
My understanding is that would take legislative action, right? We'd have to go back and reform the bill. The problem is that the earliest bill, right? This was very intentional. It's like cascading bills, which is why, right? Like the national bill that we're looking at now, that would be based on what we know in our state and in other states would be like the first bill, right? The first bill that would codify what I was talking about earlier, that parental right as fundamental, right? In order to make possible everything else. And so we would have to go back and change the legislation.
So it's literally in the legislation that one parent
It's
can.
not that way. It's by making, well, Liz, do you want to go? It's not, in my understanding, it's not written in. It's about the codification of the parental right specifically. And then it's in ambiguous law, which makes it so that then one challenge then has to go through the review process. Liz, is that your understanding of it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what we're seeing right now, and this is an action that you can do, is take a look in your school board district at your policy for media or curriculum or content review. Is there a policy already in place for reviewing those things? Check and see, if there are parameters or boundaries around that. We can ask for that, that something remain on the shelf until it is reviewed or until it is determined inappropriate or not age appropriate. Right now, at least in Florida, there is legislation that's moving this session that does restrict these book reviews and say that they would have to be taken off the shelves if it is challenged by one person. So we'll see if that ends up being what comes through. Another big piece of this conversation for us is, we used to have conservatives that were the party of small government and local control, but we are not seeing that at all anymore. And so being able to go to your school board and ask for this policy change and to advocate locally is what we still want to try to do as long as we can before they continue to kind of, concentrate all the power and authority.
I have one more comment to make. One of my colleagues suggested that we start challenging some of the books that they like, like I'm an LGBT whatever person, and I really don't like how you're portraying that this heterosexual couple and their family is the norm, or the only way to be. Like, is there a way to kind of counteract it from the other point of view and get the same, okay, well, we're going to start taking some of the books you like off the shelves then. Has anyone talked about that?
Well, I totally understand the desire to do that. I would caution us against that because then it takes away our ability to say that like we are anti-censorship, right? Like,
Right.
We are anti-book bans, right? And so I would caution us against that. And I do think that the biggest thing that we have in our arsenal right now to fight this, as frustrating as it is to make noise. Like, we are seeing that the public pressure is shifting the tide. And the same thing that is upsetting all of you is seeing that this is happening. It's the seeing that this is happening. The same thing that you're seeing is also putting public pressure on these folks. And that's the kind of thing that's going to help us make these changes that we want to make. And I know we have 2 more questions, and I think we're going to move to wrap up.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Becky, I know you've been waiting. Please come off mute and ask your question.
Okay, well, I have a question. It would be helpful to have so in Colorado, we have a different type of scenario because Colorado is very local control. So yeah, I understand about the federal Bill of Rights. I've been watching it for a long time. Our issue is more of a local issue. So we have an organization that will try to promote a local Bill of Rights at the local level. So I would like 3 facts. Like if I were to take it to my school board at a public comment, 3 facts I can say, why we would oppose a local Bill of Rights. Other point I just wanted to say real quick. We just had a social studies revision update here in Colorado. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to watch your state social studies, I can't talk, social studies standards revision process. American Civics Alliance, American Birthright is pushing legislation in Ohio. They try to push it here in Colorado. American Birthright social studies standards, some of the supplemental reading for those standards is Florida's best ELA standards. So some of us in Colorado are taking a deep dive in that to figure out how a school district in Colorado is able to use these different social studies standards besides, yes, Hillsdale, besides that what was pushed by or supported and voted on by our state board of ed. So right now in Ohio, there is a bill that has been presented called to create a task force to have American birthright social studies standards in Ohio. I cannot emphasize how important this is. Thanks.
So bad. I'm sorry, Becky.
But I looked at them and I was like, this is aligning to Florida's best ELA standards. I do not know how we can do this in Colorado.
So Becky, to your question about the 3 talking points, I encourage you to look, I know Joy's going to send some of this stuff in a follow-up email, but the Moms for Freedom document with the priorities has some messaging in there. I'd also encourage you to find some of your local organizations, because I do think, this is, so sorry. This is mono legislation that's being like adapted by different areas. So there might be variations to yours that won't match up with the national exactly, or even the state. And so, I think find some state organizations. I also wanted to flag for you that we just had on Tuesday, one of our Moms Rising members at a similar call like this on Tuesday, realized that there's a ballot initiative for parental rights that's that they're trying to move in Colorado for 2024. So I would say that anyone that you know in Colorado, that would be a good thing to flag, because what she was noting, Joy, remember, you were there, tell me if I'm recalling this right, is that because ballot initiatives not are easy, but can pass, right, in Colorado,
a ballot initiative?
A ballot initiative, right? Because ballot initiatives are easy to get on the ballot.
Right.
Think about it, if people don't have the context and don't know, a ballot initiative that says parental rights, and you don't have the context, and all it is the messaging, you might vote for that.
I gotta look at that. I was not aware of that.
I have not looked at it. This was someone who mentioned it on Tuesday, so you should absolutely, anyone who's in Colorado, do some research on that.
Okay, if any Colorado people are on here and know about it, please reach out to me. Thanks.
And we can try to help, I think, make some
make the connections. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know about that. I knew that. So we have FAIR here in Colorado chapter, and they are pushing it, and they look great, but they're not. So, okay, thank you.
Join our Keep Marching group and make connections in there with folks in your state. Thank you for your question, Becky. We've got time for one more question. Julia, please come up and ask your question.
Thank you. And actually, it's more of a comment than a question. I hope that's allowed. What Steve Bannon did was he knows that research shows that very few Americans know who is on their school board or who their state legislative representative is. We just, as a country of voters, we don't know. And Steve Bannon knew that. And that is why he told his little soldiers to take over America one school board at a time, because they could basically run anybody as a candidate, and the voters wouldn't know one candidate from another. Plus, most voters don't go out and vote for school board, and they don't vote for state legislature, and if they do, they don't know who they're voting for. But there is a saving grace in all of this, and that is that the same research that shows those things that Bannon is having his little foot soldiers take advantage of, that same research shows that the absolutely number one predictor of who's going to get elected in any election is, of all things, name recognition. It's not policy, it's not what they believe, it's not who they are, it's do people recognize the name? And that goes to the fact that if people go to the polls and they don't know who these people are, they just pick the name that they've heard before. So that actually presents us with a wonderful opportunity. If we can get good candidates for state legislatures and for school boards, and then get their names known, Now, money is a big player in that because Moms for Liberty can afford all those yard signs. And that's how in my district in Florida, the most horrible Proud Boys affiliated candidate that you can possibly imagine got elected because there were tons of signs with his name on it, right? But we can do the same thing. We may not be as well funded as they are, but we have our social media. We have Thursday night going to dinner with our buddies. We have a lot of ways that we can get those names of the good candidates known. I know that we hesitate to talk politics because it's not considered polite, but maybe a little bit of talking politics to get that name out there, or wearing a t-shirt, or inviting this good school board candidate to your dinner party or whatever. Get their names known so that they have a chance of competing and taking over, because most people don't know what's going on at the school board level still, and they don't know who their candidates are. But get those names out there and get the good guys elected.
Thank you, Julia. You have perfectly rounded off this conversation. Thank you for your comment. You're right. We have to have great people running for school boards, running for office, right? Get the people who are actually aligned with mom policies on the ballot so that we can continue to create a better community, a better country. You all, this has been such a rich conversation. I know we can stay here for hours and hours, and we don't want this to end. And I am so grateful for the time that we have spent together. A big thank you to Kristen and Nina for sharing their expertise, and also to Elizabeth for sharing their expertise about what they are seeing on a national and on a local level. This important conversation has been recorded, and we will share the recording with everyone who signed up for this meeting in a follow-up email. But let's not stop the conversation there, right? It doesn't end here. I would love for us to keep the conversation going, not just on the Keep Marching, but let's create a squad, right? Email keepmarching@MomsRising.org if you are interested. Let's get together. Let's work together. Let's organize together, especially at the local level. We're fired up and we are ready to keep doing this work. A big thank you to all of you, our Keep Marching members, right? You are a big part of this movement and why we continue to hold power and continue to do this work so successfully. In upcoming meetings, we'll continue to talk about the hunger cliff. We'll talk about guns and the hidden history of the Second Amendment. We'll also be sharing details and sign-up pages soon, so stay tuned. We cannot wait to see you at the next Keep Marching. Be on the lookout for the follow-up resources that will go out and the recording, so you can share this, you can watch it again, and you can share it with your friends and with your family, right? The conversation does not stop here. Have a wonderful, wonderful night, and thank you so much for being here. Good night, everybody. Good night.